Here we go. There we are. Woohoo! How you doing, Maya?
Great. Ooh.
Room walking.
Mhm.
You see me dancing?
Yeah, there. Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Timothy, and good morning, everybody watching us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, listening to us in Clubhouse. It's a pleasure to have you with us in the Japanese Expert Insights One-on-One. That is the Japanese Politics One-on-One for 246th episode. Yes, it's we are steadily moving towards the full 5 years, I think. Yes, but Timothy, very, very, very deep appreciation to you for being here every morning for all these years and for delivering the news on Japanese politics, the news that people can read in the newspapers as well, but also a lot of things that are not published anywhere else except here.
That's right. We usually are about 2 or 3 days ahead of the news cycle, and hopefully we're bringing a little bit more insight and a little bit deeper analysis to those people who are really that interested in what's going on in Japanese politics, what it means, and what it pretends, Maya. We're 12 weeks away from hitting the 5 year mark. Did you know that?
No, sorry, I was not counting. Thank you very much for counting for me as well. Yes.
Well, it's today is 246, as you said. It's October 26th. What a busy week we've had this last week, and what's going to happen this next week. So I really appreciate everybody tuning in, you too, Maya, for
Yep.
what's going on in Japanese politics. This is an action-packed week in front of us, but wow, what happened this last week? I'd like to get into that. First of all, I'd like to welcome a lot of the new members that are joining us, new Japan hands, budding Japan hands, researchers, graduate students, and that sort of things, and diplomats, people who are just pursuing business between Japan and the United States, and these kinds of things are critically important to you, and we really appreciate you tuning in when we get together on Sunday. You can see I'm not on the good ship Grimm's. The weather was just too bad. It's raining in Tokyo, but out on the coast it's even worse, and I didn't want to risk the digital signature being garbled and the pixelation on the beautiful video. So I wanted to give it to you nice and crisp. So I came back to my home office last night, and that's where I'm broadcasting from. So today I'd like to talk about what's going on, what happened with the new prime minister. She became, Sanae Takaichi became prime minister Tuesday of last week. She announced her cabinet immediately. She announced her policy on Friday. She had a telephone call with President Trump yesterday, and then she left for Malaysia. So she'll be in Malaysia. Then she'll come back here to meet with President Trump on Tuesday. He'll be here for 3 days. And then he leaves for South Korea, and she leaves for South Korea too, staying there until Sunday. So it's an action-packed week, and we really anticipate some real things of critical importance to be happening as a consequence of this Trump meeting, not just with her, but also potentially in South Korea with the president of China as well. There's a lot going on there, and also politically in Japan. You know, she formed this coalition with Ishin-no-kai that she had, or the LDP had a couple of selections, realistically only two, with the Democratic Party for the People under Mr. Tamaki and under Ishin-no-kai to form a bit of a coalition. She was able to cobble it together. It's not quite a coalition because Ishin refused to have any cabinet seats. So they're easy in, they can be easy out. So that holds a lever over the LDP. So it suggests a little bit of fragility there. Geopolitically, there's a lot going on. North Korea wasted no time to launch a series of short-range intercontinental ballistic missiles on Wednesday and say, hey, don't forget about us. We're still here, even though you might have a new prime minister. Hey, pay attention, right? So a little bit of saber rattling. Russia is being a little bit, threatening. They have canceled all innocent passage in the northern territories. You know, those are the 4 islands that were overtaken by the Soviet Union at the end of World War II. After the two bombs had dropped, they swooped in. They were going to invade Hokkaido. Those islands are still occupied and hotly contested by Japan. And there are a couple of factories there that are producing natural gas, of which Japan is an investor in. And now they have, right of safe passage, innocent passage has been blocked over the last 10 days. So that's very serious. Also, just geopolitically, there's a lot going on that impacts Japan because trade flows are critical to Japan for the Japanese economy. GDP has benefited a bit. The International Monetary Body said that Japan's GDP increased about 1.2%. It was projected to go 0.6%. So it had a little bit of a boost, but it's a little bit fluffy there. And the markets are a little bit reacting to Sanae Takaichi as prime minister. It's up a bit, it's back a bit. The coalition with Ishin, it looks a little bit fragile. And you can see this in the thermometer read that we give you on what's going on with the yen, what's likely to happen, what are the moves of the Bank of Japan, and that sort of thing. Anyway, I'd like to get into those in a little bit more depth so that we can tumble into the Q&A. If you have questions as we go through this briefing, please feed them to Maya. Maya compresses them together. If some of them are similar or look like each other, she'll compress those. I don't know, last week, how many? We had about 10 or 15 questions last week. That's the real meat of this briefing. So I'll try and get through the briefing points as quickly as possible so that we can get to the issues that are of most important to you. Maya?
Yes, thank you. And to everybody watching us, please remember that we welcome, as Timothy said already, we welcome comments and questions, and also you're sharing your thoughts. Appreciate that very much indeed. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet or followed us, depending on which platform you're watching us on, please do that. Let us know that you have been here by hitting like, and feel free to share these briefings, of course, with your friends and colleagues, family members, and acquaintances who might benefit from them, because this is, we say it quite often, but this is the only briefing that follows the Japanese politics, the developments there faithfully week after week. And by doing that and by watching these briefings, you can actually follow and develop an understanding of what to expect and what might happen. So consider this. And thank you very much for being with us so far. So Timothy, it is over to you now.
Thank you very much. Sanae Takaichi became the 104th Prime Minister of Japan in the post-war period. She is the first female, as we all know, the whole world is following this. We know that she's the first female Prime Minister. This really gives her a boost, but her weakness is in domestic politics and the fact that she as the representative of the largest political party, the LDP, doesn't have a majority. It needs to have buy-in with Ishin-no-kai, which is the Osaka-based, fairly conservative, on some issues more conservative than the LDP, party that supplements the LDP's vote in both the upper house and the lower house. And that was the agreement that was reached last Monday. Then the Diet opened on Tuesday, and she had enough votes to become prime minister in a really nip and tuck kind of race. So the LDP forms this, it's not quite a coalition. Funnily enough, the Ishin-no-kai party did not insist on a cabinet seat. You'll remember that when the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki, was toying with the LDP, he said, yes, I can bring in my party. It's smaller than Ishin, but we're pretty good and we can match it up, but I really want a very high post. If you're not going to give me the prime minister position, maybe the finance minister, which many would say is the second most important position. There's a toss-up on that. But finance is definitely very strong. And to give that to somebody like Mr. Tamaki, for him to bring it in, that's a big deal. Ishin didn't insist on that. So you've got to wonder what is really in the mix. What is going on with Ishin? For the Komeito, the party, the coalition partner that the LDP had for 26 years, they always got the Ministry of Land Transportation and Tourism, a really big ministry, that they could doyle out contracts, they could supplement some of their constituents' business because they hold that ministry. That's how human nature works. But Ishin didn't insist even on that. And so the curiosity here is they are in, but we're only in for as long as it benefits us. And if you don't live up to your promises, we're going to be out of here. And you are dancing on a very thin wire. So that's why the markets are reacting the way they do. The LDP holds 196 seats. Ishin holds 41 seats. So together they still lack maybe 2 seats, or 2 or 3 seats in the lower house for a majority. So they have to get those seats from somebody else, from some of the independents perhaps. In the upper house, they lack 5 seats. So it's even worse in the upper house. But everybody knows that the lower house is the one that really controls. If the lower house passes a bill and it goes to the upper house and the upper house says, no, I don't like it, you have to vote on it again. The lower house votes one more time and that vote carries. Particularly with the budget and with the selection of prime minister, the lower house really holds sway. So the real sweet spot for the LDP is capture the lower house no matter what you have to do. They're still short of it, but there are lots of bennies to entice people who are sitting on the fence. But at least according to the promises that were made, and we can get into those promises that the LDP gave to Ishin, you can always have 2 or 3 floaters, independents. There are a good number of independents within the Diet in the lower house that don't belong to any affiliation. They vote with their hearts. They vote according to what their constituents say, rather than what typical or traditional LDP politics, which is dominated by factions, dictate. The other kind of interesting thing that happened when the prime minister selected her cabinet is that there are probably 22 cabinet positions. She named 19 of her ministers, and you would have thought, according to the calculations in pre-Kishida age, the factions pretty much dominate. So if you had a big faction, you could pretty much guarantee that you would get the biggest number of cabinet seats. So it was pretty much along the faction strength. Those factions have all disappeared. There's only one faction now. It's Mr. Aso's faction. And those dynamics no longer exist. And you can see that in the example of the cabinet positions now. Mr. Aso has the only remaining faction. Seiwa-kai and Motegi's faction, they have loose groupings, but the term of a faction has become passé. It's become maybe not even a good word to use, except if you're Taro Aso. So you would think that Aso, in the final cut, his vote and his support for Miss Takaichi made her president of the LDP and thus prime minister. And also, he was influential in making her prime minister when the Diet voted on that. He doesn't have any cabinet seats. He's got 2 very powerful positions. He is the vice president of the LDP, and his brother-in-law is the chief cabinet secretary. So that's pretty good. Mr. Suzuki, married to Mr. Aso's sister, was previously the Minister of Finance. So maybe that was such a big deal. And just reflect back on this offer that was made to Tamaki. If you can do it, bring your faction or your political party with the LDP, we'll give you the finance ministry. A big deal. That fell apart just because of his arrogance and because he kind of didn't read the room well and didn't play his cards very well. Within 24 hours, the LDP switched the script and went to Ishin, and within three days, they sealed the deal. And then this coalition is not quite the right word for it, but this amalgamation of the LDP and Ishin started, and it was sealed a week ago tomorrow. So everything is really so much in flux. A lot happened this last week with her appointing the cabinet ministers. Also, Mr. Aso got 2 not cabinet seats, but still very powerful seats. Mr. Motegi scored 6 seats, and Mr. Motegi was running against her as prime minister, you will recall. The number 1 and the number 2 slots were with Mr. Koizumi and Miss Takaichi, and Takaichi beat out Mr. Koizumi largely with the support and the contribution of Mr. Motegi, who was one of the 5 candidates. Mr. Aso, also a supporter of Miss Takaichi, you would have thought would get a little bit more of a boost there, but it turns out that Mr. Motegi got about 6 cabinet seats. That's huge. That's a huge boost for him. Seiwa-kai also got 4 to 5 cabinet seats. Seiwa-kai is blamed for all of the money going into the pockets and created this huge brouhaha. Mr. Abe was assassinated. It went to the Unification Church and how much money they were contributing to politicians, but in large, Seiwa-kai. And also this tactic, this policy of Seiwa-kai to hold these briefing breakfasts and hagimaskai and briefings. I go to them all the time, multiple times throughout the week. You pay ichimayen or nimayen, and you have a bento, or you have a breakfast, or you might have cocktails at night, and then you listen to a couple of politicians give really crisp information, detailed briefings to their constituents or to their supporters. And you can join that. You need to be vetted, but I've been doing this for 35 years. I've been joining some of the Benkyo-kai for some of these politicians for the entire time, for 35 years. So they know who I am. I can go in. They don't think I'm a spy in spite of my last name. And you can generate a good deal of money from that. And what Seiwa-kai did, kind of from the administration of Mr. Mori, maybe 25, 30 years ago, is to take that money, don't report it, and distribute it to the people who are bringing in the most people to these Benkyo-kai. And that went on for 15 or 20 years. Mr. Abe said, guys, this is after he was prime minister. Mr. Suga was prime minister at the time. He said, I don't think this is a good idea. I'm getting a little bit of a vibration that the press is going to pick up on this and we're going to get into trouble. So let's stop it. It stopped cold turkey. He was assassinated very soon after that. I don't think as a consequence of that, but somebody killed him with a homemade rifle because his inheritance had been taken away from his mother and contributed or given to the Unification Church. He was mad. He was looking for somebody to punish and blame. And it was just Mr. Abe who was standing closest to him and most vulnerable to him. So he killed Mr. Abe, and then this whole thing began to blow up. And Seiwa-kai began to reinitiate, as soon after his assassination, this money coming into the individual pockets, not reporting it on tax, being very quiet about it. So that's kind of flipped Japanese politics completely on its head, and that's why we have this situation today. Had it not been for that, it's unlikely that Sanae Takaichi would be prime minister today, although she was a protege and a favorite of Mr. Abe. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, and I apologize for going into the weeds so much, but this background is really important to understand where we are today and where we're going. The point here is that Seiwa-kai, those members who were involved in putting money into their pockets and publicly pilloried, the LDP said, look, you guys are bad. You guys are really bad. For 1 year, you can't hold a position. You can't be a cabinet post. You can't hold an LDP post. We're not even going to give you a committee chair. You guys are out in the woods, but that's it. In 1 year, you can come back. So that year has passed. And according to the LDP and the prognosis of political pundits, they have served their time. They have been cleansed. There's been an upper house election. There's been a lower house election. The people have spoken. They blamed them for some of the ills that they generated, but they've been cleansed through an election process, and they're good to go. So Seiwa-kai, it's not a political faction coalesced anymore, but they're still very tight. And Sanae Takaichi was not a member of Seiwa-kai, but she was appointed by Mr. Abe as her protege, strangely enough. So when it became time for the appointment of candidates for prime minister, Mr. Abe didn't select somebody in his faction, the largest faction in Japanese politics at the time. He chose her, an independent. And that is really remarkable. So it's possible that had that brouhaha never happened, that, and certainly if Mr. Abe was still alive, that sure, maybe Miss Takaichi would be prime minister today. But it's there's just a lot going on there. In any event, Ishin has insisted on a couple of things to have this coalition, this loose coalition. They want the LDP. So in order to elect the prime minister, the Diet had to have an extraordinary Diet session. It was launched on Monday. I think it was Monday. It might have been Tuesday of last week. And that Diet session, it's called an extraordinary Diet session. By the Constitution, the Japanese Diet is supposed to hold one session, a regular session, from January for 150 days. That's the requirement. But it can have other sessions throughout the year if the Diet so determines that. They determined that Mr. Ishiba is going to retire. He's going to resign as prime minister. So in order to do that, we have to have an extraordinary Diet. They decided that Diet will be for 53 days until December 13th, I believe. So the Diet opens. They have an immediate vote for prime minister. Well, first of all, Mr. Ishiba formally resigns. The emperor comes in. He opens the Diet. Mr. Ishiba formally resigns. And then immediately they go into an election for prime minister, which Ms. Takaichi won on Tuesday. So Ishin said, we will vote for you as prime minister, but we want, the number of seats in the lower house and in the upper house, it could be reduced by 10%, we believe, Ishin believes. So we insist that in this 53-day period, that is lightning fast to get just about anything done. You could get a supplemental budget. There are certain things you can do within a 53-day period, but things of real significance, it's difficult to. They extracted the promise by the LDP that we will reduce the number of seats in the Diet by 10%. That is huge, 10% reduction. And everybody knows that the reduction is probably aimed at Komeito. Komeito was the coalition partner for 26 years for the LDP. They broke off. They said, we're finished with you guys. We don't like you. You visit Yasukuni, you're warmongers. You want to revise the Constitution. You want to reinstall the emperor as the head of state. He is the head of state, but to return the Constitution to a more traditional values. And we're not game for that. And especially you, Takaichi, we don't like you. So Ishin comes in and says, let's go get those guys. And the LDP said, okay, yeah. So the 10% reduction is to reduce the number of seats. Probably there are two places this 10% reduction will occur, probably in rural areas and also probably in the two, there's a proportional representation of vote, and then there's a general vote where you vote for an individual. In the proportional, you vote for the particular party. And I think the numbers will come out of the proportional and the numbers will come out of the rural voters. But by and large, it will probably be Komeito who suffers. Komeito and Ishin are at loggerheads. They despise each other. In Osaka, the stronghold of Ishin, the LDP, Ishin essentially kicked out everybody in Komeito, even though they had a couple of agreements. I'll leave you alone in this district here. We won't run a candidate, but it's been very tenuous, and I think this battle is going to continue. So the LDP extracted that promise within the next 53 days. They will reduce the number there. So now that angers Komeito, you can tell, and they find a partner in the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki's group, and they say, look what those guys are doing. They're trying to exterminate us. So let's form a coalition. Let's get together with the Constitutional Democratic Party and let's look for scandals. Let's see what happens with Ishin and with the LDP, and let's really go after them. So if you've been following the press, and I know everybody on the show generally has, there's a lot of this fluff. Sanae Takaichi, she's a war hawk, she's a warmonger. and all of these negative things. If you've been watching Japanese politics for any period of time, for like a decade or 2 decades, it always comes up whenever the prime minister is elected. The knives come out and people criticize them. They paint them into a corner. They paint a picture of them, but it almost never really pans out the way the press initially paints these individuals. These are sterling individuals. They love their country. They're politicians. They're polished. And yeah, they have certain proclivities, but the way the press pumps it out, it creates this diversion and this kind of color. And I guess it sells, but it's not always accurate. I think take a look at Miss Takaichi today and imprint that image in your brain. Give it 6 months and look at her. She will age considerably because this job is so tough. You saw that happen with Mr. Ishiba. You saw that with Mr. Suga. You didn't see it so much with Mr. Kishida, strangely enough. But this job is so onerous and it is so demanding. Look at Ms. Takaichi. She was appointed on Tuesday as prime minister. She selected her cabinet. She had a policy speech. She's in Malaysia. She left from Malaysia yesterday. She had a call with President Trump on Saturday, maybe 25 minutes, that was reported as very constructive. And we can kind of imagine what was said. I'll see you in Malaysia, and we are going to enhance Japan's defense policy. We promised in 5 years to increase defense spending 2% within this 5-year period. 2% of GDP will be devoted, whereas it's always been 1% or less. We're going to double that over this 5-year period. And she committed to him that they're going to accelerate it. So rather than the 5-year period, she's going to accelerate it to a 4-year period during the next fiscal year. So she'll get a little bit of pushback from that, but that is a commitment that probably was music to Donald Trump's ears. She's going to import F-150 trucks, a large number of those, just as kind of a consolation to sweeten this meeting, this important meeting she's going to have with the President of the United States over 3 days. That'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And on Thursday, the President of the United States departs for South Korea, and the Prime Minister also departs for South Korea. South Korea is going to be a big deal. It's an ASEAN meeting. Heads of state will be there. The President of China, Xi, will be there. There is some noise that Donald Trump will meet with Xi on the sidelines. I think they'll probably at least greet each other. I don't know if they'll have a sit down and talk, but you never know. And you also don't know quite what the president and the prime minister are going to talk about, but you can imagine that this is a key inflection point for this prime minister. Based on a great Trump meeting, she could now extend the likability for her. Usually they give you 100 days, but it could really accelerate that likability. She's reduced tariffs. The cars are going in. The medicine is going to be shipped a little bit more. The economy is going to take a little bit more of a blip up. The yen is going to strengthen. Some of these key features we will know when we get together next week. We'll know a lot of these keystone issues. Not everything, because I think in South Korea there will be some other new things that go on that impact Japan. So it's always something to look forward to. And once again, thank you for joining us. And once again, the North Koreans want to make sure they fired a series of short-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, high trajectory. So they didn't enter Japan's exclusive economic zone. They actually flew to the north and they landed in the water there. But they just want to make sure. And this, North Korea is perfecting missile technology and trajectory and that sort of thing, but it doesn't quite have the payload. So the affinity and the facilitation between North Korea and Russia is really becoming more and more scary, because Russia has the warheads and North Korea has the delivery vehicle. What's going on Sakhalin in the northern territories is also very worrying, because the Russians have locked off those 4 islands for innocent passage. That means not everybody, just Japanese. So the Japanese joined the United States in applying sanctions to Russia, immediately Russia imposed this, it's not a blockade, it's just a right of access has been blocked for Japanese fishermen, for commercial vessels, for merchant marines on Japanese flagged ships. So there's a lot of fishing, and there are agreements that are bound there. The Japanese can go to these northern territories to the within their exclusive zone. They can fish salmon, they can fish uni, they can fish all sorts of things according to separate agreements that have been made, and that has been blocked. So that's a big, big deal, and something that we should be watching. It's not just in the northern area too. In the south, China has had more incursions over October than any other time. That means the Coast Guard and the People's Liberation Air Force have been skirting the borders and sometimes broaching the borders, which means that the Japanese now have to scramble. They have to send boats over there. But the number and the duration of these incursions has been exponential. It stopped very briefly. There was a typhoon that went through the area 2 weeks ago, and for about 3 days, there was no passage, there was no threat, as you would expect, but then it increased again. So it's in the north, as far as Japan is concerned, it's in the north, it's in the south. These kind of vice grips are being applied in a lot of different aspects, just to make sure, Japan, you know where you are, and you want to be careful, whatever you're going to be deciding with Donald Trump, don't forget us, like North Korea said, we're here too. Don't forget us. So there's a lot of geopolitical and regional instability there too. That's reflected in what's going on with the yen. So the yen broke 152 yen to the dollars. 152 is kind of the tipping point. Usually when it breaches 152, 153, the Bank of Japan gets involved. They purchase yen massively. It increases the value, and the yen goes down to maybe 149, sometimes 147. So it's a little bit more profitable for the export machine. It's not so great for the people who live here who are buying imported things. Japan only provides 36% of its own food caloric intake. So a lot of stuff is coming in, and it's not just food, but it's materials, it's clothing, it's a lot of consumer items as well. But when your economy depends on automobiles and parts, you want to sell those a little bit more cheaply, a little bit more attractively overseas, because that facilitates the economy. That's the decision that Kasumigaseki policymakers have. Do we make it profitable for the big guys, and the population suffers a little bit? How do we tweak that? And one of the ways they tweak it is by a stimulus package, which the prime minister is undergoing right now. So in that 53-day period, they will definitely have a stimulus package to begin to stabilize the Takaichi administration, and hope to God that there are no scandals, that there's no money underground, that there are no girlfriends. These kinds of things come up with unfortunate frequency, especially in this new administration. So we'll see. And the administration is, I think it's a good administration. She has mostly people who are aligned with her politically, fiscally, but it'll be a different administration than it was certainly with Mr. Suga, with Mr. Kishida, and definitely different from the Ishiba administration. So stand by for that. People frequently ask, and I imagine we'll get it in the Q&A period. I'm going a little bit long here, Maya. Sorry.
Go ahead. Always
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. They always ask about a snap election. So whenever there's a change in prime ministers, there's this honeymoon period. Typically in the United States, in England, it's about 100 days, although England is having its share of woes as well. But there's a little bit of a honeymoon period. Mr. Ishiba took advantage of that and immediately held a snap election, even though he said he wouldn't. Because at that point in time, the LDP was teetering on losing their majority in the lower house, and he needed to fix that. And so he had a snap election, and they lost more seats. And then they had the upper house election. They still lost more seats. So the idea here is Miss Takaichi, she's flying a little bit high. You know, it's newsworthy, global news. She meets with President Trump in her first week in office. Wow. And what does Trump say about her? They're not going to golf. She doesn't golf, so he will probably golf. He'll probably visit the golf course where he and Shinzo golfed the last time he was here. That was 2.5. No, that was 4.5 years ago. That was a long time ago. And so he might have a golfing session, but it's probably a little bit impolite. I don't know. It's not quite on his schedule yet. But in any event, forming a bond with the current prime minister is utmost importance. And a snap election at this point in time is a possibility. Above and beyond anything else, the LDP needs to be back in the seat. They hate having to rely on Komeito. That's out. They hate having to rely on Ishin. They don't even have handcuffs on Ishin by having them in a juicy cabinet position. Ishin has really preserved their ability to be flexible and to say, we don't like you. We don't like what you're proposing. You said 10% reduction. It's already January. You didn't do it. So we're going to join this no confidence motion that's being proposed by Komeito and by the Democratic Party to the People and supported by the Constitutional Democratic Party. You guys are going to be out of here. So it could be, but it's a very low possibility that there's going to be a snap election. So we can get into that a little bit better. The 10% diet reduction is probably it's probably a tripstone for having an election. If it doesn't go through in the 53-day period, if there are other things that are going on, that reduction, that's a huge move. Ishin insisted on it. They also insisted that Osaka is the second capital. It is the preferred second capital in the event that something happens to Tokyo. It is not Tsukuba, which is 60 miles away or an hour away by train. It's going to be Osaka. So let's promise on that. So you'll see a lot of things that are related to that. Maybe some ministries will move their headquarters down there. So let's see what else is going on. The cabinet lineup. We talked a little bit about that. Where are we going? Trump Takaichi, 3 days, high stakes. The economy, we talked about the yen being at 152.82 on Friday. It's up 0.17% from the day earlier, but month to month, it's about 1.96% up. So it's up again, it's down again. These numbers are very small. They don't make that much of an interest differential difference. But as between the U.S. Fed and the Bank of Japan, there is a differential between the United States dollar and the Japanese yen, and the Fed and the Treasury Cabinet Secretary is always pushing Japan to kind of equalize this and make this a little bit more in line with each other. Japan was the number 2 economy in the world. It is now the number 5 economy in the world. It's going to continue to slip. So holding that position and making trade flows consistent is going to be a high priority for the Bank of Japan and for the Prime Minister. So we'll continue to watch that. I apologize for going so much into the weeds, but there's just so much going on. I think maybe it's best to just kind of glide into the Q&A so that we can get into some of the things that really interest you. Some of the things maybe have keyed off what I talked about with the LNG, with the Sakhalin-2, and how much that is going to potentially impact Japan's import mix. I think it's about maybe 7%, 8% of Japan's energy mix is dependent on Sakhalin-2. And with these right of safe passage and innocent passage as a kind of first step to tightening down that, Japan could be really squeezed in a very important and very meaningful way, depending on what goes on with Russia, with the United States, with Ukraine, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Venezuela. 10% of the oil from Japan comes from Venezuela. It's very good, sweet oil. Venezuela is now under attack. The United States has sent its largest aircraft carrier and the aircraft carrier never travels by itself. It goes with a fleet of other destroyers and support vessels. It's a big deal that is, I think it's approaching or it's outside of Venezuelan waters now. So that's a huge flashpoint that we need to keep our eyes on. A lot is going to happen this next week. Malaysia today, Trump on Tuesday. He will visit with His Majesty the Emperor as soon as he comes in, and then the following day he will have his summit with Takaichi. There will be a state dinner on Wednesday. I think he's going to go to Yokota. They'll fly the Air Force One, the helicopter that the president flies in on. Definitely the Beast is in town. So if you're in Tokyo, you just need to be careful. Make sure you carry your identification with you. There will be tons of police everywhere as the motorcade zips through towns. Abe Akie will also visit with Trump. So there's a lot of fanfare. There's a lot of diplomacy. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance that will be going on a very tight day. But I think if you're President Trump, this happens all the time. Malaysia, Tokyo, South Korea, and then who knows what's going to go after that. He has said that he would like to meet with our dear leader, Mr. Kim from North Korea. He's made it a priority to meet with President Xi, not just on the sidelines, but actually to go to China. We had suspected that it might be during this trip. I don't think that that's going to happen this time, but maybe before the year is out. This is all a dynamic that really impacts Japan, Japan's trade, Japan's security, Japan's alliances with other like-minded countries, Japan's desire to revise the constitution. With Ishin wants to revise the constitution too, and I see that becoming more and more a possibility as we approach the defense spending and the need for Japan to create another industry that can sell products worldwide with high quality and high value so that they can get back on their street. They need to extract themselves from this 25-year doldrum and get back on track. So let me end it there, Maya. Kick it back to you for Q&A so that we can get right into the meat and the heart of this briefing. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Every Sunday, we're here talking about what's going on in Japanese politics that is or should be important to you. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. Well, I would say that we need to move to the Q&A session briskly, because we've got quite a few questions and comments there as well, which we very much appreciate. Once again, before I read the first questions that, of course, come from Byron Johnston, who, well, he didn't wake up early this morning because he's in the United States, but he stayed up until the time he was, it was time for him to pose the questions. If you're watching us now and haven't subscribed or followed us yet, please do that. Help us spread the word and also share these briefings with the people you know who might benefit from knowing more about what is happening in Japanese politics, because it does help business, the policies, and everything else. And also remember that Langley Esquire, Timothy's company, does policy analysis and policy reports as well. It's not only political briefings, it's much, much deeper than that. All right, and now moving on to, to the first three questions. Yes, all right, here we go with Byron's first question. Is the high debt to GDP ratio a central factor in Japan's Ministry of Finance, bureaucracy being able to veto most changes suggested by politicians in tax and fiscal policy? In Japan, it is about 250%, while in the US it is about 125. Has there ever been a time when the Ministry of Finance has not been central to policy making?
Yeah, that's a great observation. And no, increasingly as the debt to GDP ratio continues to get higher, they've just never been able to solve it. It keeps going higher. 256%. That's how much debt they have compared to their gross domestic product. And a lot of people will say, well, that's kind of artificial money, but it's money that is owed, they're spending more that they're generating, and this has been going on for years and years, decades, in fact. So, yes, the finance ministry holds huge sway over. The prime minister wants to do this, but we have to put the brakes on because, Miss Prime Minister, how are you going to pay for that? You want to, we have a 5 year plan, 2% of GDP. It starts slow, but by the end of 5 years, we're going to hit 2% of GDP devoted to defense issues. We're going to buy a lot of material from the United States. We're going to develop it. We're going to hire more soldiers. We're going to have SOFA-like alliances with many countries, with Britain, with Australia, with other countries. That costs money. We're going to, strengthen some of the infrastructure so that by 5 years we're going to hit 2%. So in the first year, it was a little bit beyond 2%, and then they went down and then came up again. And now the prime minister unilaterally says, maybe without checking with the finance ministry, we're going to take that to 4 years. Mr. President of the United States, we're going to do it better. We're going to bring it closer. We can't do 3%. I know you want us to, and I know you're telling us that there are European countries that do 5% of GDP. We can't do that. Give us a little bit of a breather. We're going to bring it in a little bit. We're going to do what we can. But yes, the finance ministry is going to put the brakes on that because they can't raise taxes anymore without crushing the economy. They can't reduce the consumption tax. It's now at 10%. For many things, foodstuffs and essentials get 8%, but they can't raise that amount more. In fact, during the election process for LDP president, the issue was, why don't you just drop foods and consumables to 0%? And they couldn't even do that because the economy relies so much on generating this income so that the GDP to debt ratio doesn't go higher. I hope that somewhat responds to the question, but it's a complicated question. But yes, the finance ministry is probably the most powerful ministry that there is.
Okay, moving on towards the next question. Could you explain why you think Ishin made an alliance with LDP but did not join the cabinet? Is it, as some suggest, that Ishin wants to take credit for successes but leave the blame for
Sure.
failures to Ms. Takaichi?
Okay, so it's actually a pretty clever move. If they join the LDP as a cabinet portfolio or as a coalition, then they're somewhat hamstrung. They need to follow what the prime minister says. They can't criticize the prime minister because they're in the coalition. So you'll remember that during the 26 years, Komeito, which is diametrically opposed to big business and to military spending and getting cozy with the United States and not paying as much attention to suicides or to the people who are the single parent families or some of the kids who don't have enough to eat, and there's quite a few of those actually, to kind of mind their manners for 26 years. Ishin-no-kai doesn't have that obligation. They're not in the cabinet, and they can also bolt at any time. And the demands that they had on the LDP are really stringent. And so the LDP is in a difficult position. We need you. We need your votes. Thank you very much. We now became prime minister. And I, Sanae Takaichi, can individually appoint all of the cabinet ministers, the 19 that are sitting in this room with me. I don't have to negotiate with you. But the sword of Damocles that's hanging over her head is, if in this next 53 days you don't reduce the diet seats by 10%, if you don't visibly make Osaka the second capital, if you don't decrease the consumption tax for lower income people, if you don't make education free up to high school for all people in the in Japan, then we'll be criticizing you the entire time too. So the other thing too is that yeah, the LDP in a coalition with Ishin, if there's a scandal, if there's something that is untoward that comes up with any member of this coalition partner, it paints the LDP also in a negative way. And since the Ishin has been not out of not out of the spotlight, but when you come into the administration, the spotlight's on you. You have people that are hunting for these picadillos, these violations of social norms, these all of these things, and so it's probably a little bit better to be a little bit separate. The LDP is blue blood. It's second and third generation LDP members of the Diet. Ishin is a little bit more rough and tumble. It's from Osaka, so you can imagine that there's a little bit more in the closets, and maybe it's just clever to kind of keep that back a bit.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to other questions about Ishin, sorry, and then we'll probably go back to the third question of Byron. So first we've got Ryan Bangia. Thank you very much, Ryan, for watching. And Ryan says, I had a thought and wonder what Tim's take is. Ishin is in a good position to get favors from the LDP, but if they end up getting their wishes, do you think it could undercut their reason for being?
Yeah, that's a sharp edge. I think from the LDP perspective, they're thinking those sons of bitches, they're just lining themselves up to be a challenge to us. So they're getting as close as they can to the limelight, and they're just putting pieces in place so for the next election, not only are they able to kick out Komeito and probably a little bit of the Democratic Party for the People, but they're going to be coming after us too. So they don't want to be friends, they just want to hold hands. And so we have to be careful. It's like, dealing with the spider. They do have attributes that can harm us. The LDP for their side is, they're between a rock and a hard place. We have to hold our nose and drink it, even though we don't like it, because it gives us the close to majority position. Number one, we have to pass the budget at the end of March. April 1st is the deadline in the first formal diet session of 2026. We must do that. If we don't do that, we're out of here. So we need to be friendly with somebody, and it turns out it's going to be Ishin. And whatever they want, whatever they cry about, whatever they pump their fists about, we really need to accommodate to the degree we can. They've already said that this 10% is going to be a little bit hard. We'll do our best, but it's kind of a promise. It's pinky finger, but yeah. And there's going to be a lot that happens. Like I said, watch Miss Takaichi's face in 6 months. Compare it to the way it looks now. She's nice. Her hair is good. She's smiling. I don't know if it's going to be like that in 6 months. This is going to be a tough administration.
Right, okay, and continuing with Ryan, since Ishin is not super ideological, could the achievement of some of their regional wishes lead to an exodus of voters as they move to vote for their own ideologies afterwards?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I catch the drift. They do have strong ideologies. They want to change the Constitution. They want to enhance defense spending. They want Japan to be stronger. They want to revise the Constitution. That's a big deal. Not everybody is on board with that. But Ishin is, LDP is. The LDP is one of the charter objectives of the LDP when it was first started was to revise the Constitution and also revise Article 9. Article 9 doesn't allow Japan to have military forces. It allows it to have self-defense forces. And as maybe a spiritual or as a philosophical issue, if you're in the self-defense forces, you don't have the pride that being a military might does. If Japan was a military, it'd probably be number 6 or number 7 in the world. It is huge, but they're kind of held back, and that you never see Japanese soldiers in uniform, although they wear uniforms when they go to work inside the Ministry of Defense in Ichigaya, maybe 300 yards from where my office is in Yotsuya. They go into the office in their civilians, and then they change into the military garb. So they want to change that. They want to give pride and kind of prominence. They're not even meeting their numbers in recruitment. They're enhancing pay and stuff like that. But yeah, Ishin wants to do the same thing as that too. It's possible, at this point it's difficult to say, but it is possible that over time Ishin and the LDP begin this process of coalition. Um, Ishin is interesting because the leader of Ishin is the governor of Osaka. And so he's got a co-leader. It used to be Mr. Baba, a colleague of mine from many years ago. We worked in the same political office. Um, they switched him out to kind of revamp Ishin in anticipation of the election for the upper house. But if if it if push came to shove and Ishin was supposed to supply a candidate for prime minister, they would be in a difficult position because the governor of Tokyo cannot run as prime minister. And he doesn't want this second in command to run as prime minister. So there's some attributes of Ishin that are not like any of the other political parties. So I think they carved out the best they could. They don't want to become prime minister this time, but maybe over time, yeah, I think that's the game. I think, it's Osaka versus Tokyo. It's been that way for what? I don't know, thousands of years, but certainly hundreds of years. And, the texture of the people, the quality, the food, the way they talk is just really, really different. And I think the Osakians and the people in Kansai really want to have a larger role in how the nation is governed. And it's not just these guys in Kasumigaseki and these stuck-up guys from the University of Tokyo. Osaka has something to offer too. I think that is part of it as well.
At the same time, we've got a comment from Hiroko Yoshida-san, and she says, it is said that Ishin does not have experienced Congress personnel, according to Mr. Hashimoto, who is the founder of Ishin. And another reason, of course, is except for Komeito, no political party which formed a coalition with LDP in the past survived. So we've got only Komeito with that parliamentary experience and coalition experience, we should say. So probably there is, those two things are at play there as well.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. And then following, on others. Okay. Here we go with a question from Manabe-san. How about the stance of Mr. Hayashi? Is he in a good position to arbitrate with Takaichi at this point of time?
So Hayashi he was chief cabinet secretary. Before that, he was foreign minister. He is a powerhouse. He's well liked in certain circles. He's got a polished image. His English is perfect. He's a lead guitar player. He's a great singer, rock and roll singer. So Takaichi is also a rock and roller, heavy metal actually. She likes cars. She likes muscle cars. So there's a lot about her personality that has come out since she's become a little bit more prominent. But she is, pretty dedicated to this, no illegal foreigners in Japan. I don't even know why that became an issue. There aren't that many people who are coming over in rubber dinghies and washing up on shore. That just doesn't happen. There are asylum seekers. There are people that have come under the guise of some sort of a amnesty, that sort of thing. So to me, it's not that big an issue, but it is an issue about, making Japan for the Japanese and make Japan a great again. And the foreigners are kicking the deer, and just, I don't know. It seems to me to be just a little bit of a flash in the pan.
May I jump in here and say that this is probably a marketing strategy because she just rode the wave of populism. And obviously it worked. I mean, it worked for other people before. It worked in the United States. It worked in Japan for the Sanseito, right?
Right.
So, yes, and I believe that, yes, that was what it was.
Yeah.
But of course, I also believe that, as many people have commented before, that she is intent to not allow the illegal immigration to grow, which I believe that it's not a bad thing per se. The thing is that, of course, once again, riding on the populist note or that platform was kind of light, but still it did the job.
Yeah. So back to the core of the question about Hayashi. What do you think of Hayashi, Langley? What do you think he's going to be a kind of a moderating force? Hayashi is he's known as being very favorable to China. Takaichi is not. She is more favorable to Taiwan, and she's going to be hard on China, and you're going to see that in the coming days. But yes, with regard to that, maybe he is providing a little bit of a break on that, but he's just a cabinet minister. He wants to stay cabinet minister. He wants to be candidate for prime minister again. I think he will at some point in time become prime minister. I think Koizumi will become prime minister. I'm not so sure about Konotaro, although I had always believed that he was going to be a prime candidate for prime minister. He stepped out this time, probably to shore up his strength for a leap the next time. But he's kind of frozen out. He's not in the cabinet. He doesn't have a cabinet position. She's really distanced him in the background. So this indicates, there has been the suggestion of a fracture of the LDP. And so there's some people that aren't as conservative as Takaichi, those that are more favorable to China kind of going off on their own, maybe. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's too much benefit in having the strength in numbers. They'll hold their nose a lot tighter to maintain that majority. And like you said, when we were talking about Ishin, we've tried it before. Nobody else is capable of running the country, running the nation. We've tried it and failed miserably. And when you try and even put a minister in office that doesn't have the chops, right? So they start them small. They give them a cabinet position. They don't give them a vice cabinet position or maybe a committee chair. They come up in measured increments, and none of the opposition has done that except for Komeito. And even Ishin, when offered, has said, no, I think we'll sit this one out. So it's a really dynamic chess game. All we can do is watch it and evaluate it and then see how that pans out. But it's a great question, a great observation.
Yes, thank you for this. I'm going back 1 week because we received a question from Rian Fairchild. And she writes, if Sanae Takaichi falters being unable to form a coalition due to Komeito, could we see the more social conservative faction of the LDP lose favor and the party pivot towards moderates like Shinjiro Koizumi? So I think since we have
already
seen
have
the result,
We've
yes,
seen that. Yeah.
yes. So, but in the future, what do you think? Well, depending on the developments, of course, if Ishin decides to leave the coalition, because as you mentioned, it's a very loose coalition at the moment.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point. I was going to say that Shinjiro, he's not even approaching Takaichi in terms of conservatism. So he's not, probably Hayashi is a little bit more liberal than Koizumi, but I see this flow towards more conservatism. But the question says, how about if they don't do very well? Is there going to be this pendulum swing? And obviously, if they don't do well, it means that the population, it means the other members of the Diet are not fully on board to spending more money for defense, for being a little bit more abrasive to the general population, not being sensitive to their needs, not giving them enough of a surplus, a supplemental budget, pushing forward just to, saber rattle and to do the bidding of the United States. That is a possibility. I don't see it as, it's a possibility. I don't see it as very high right now because, we're in that delicate 100-day period, and we've got the president of the United States here this week. Maybe having this discussion in, I think even December is a little bit early for that, but maybe February, we'll have a little bit better feel for where it's going, what that balance looks like.
all right. And then the next question from Rian Fairchild last week is, I know the Japanese left is against rearmament and arms exports, going back to Article 9. Ports.
Maya, you froze just as you said, as we talked about Article 9, and then I didn't hear anything until just now.
Forgive me. Okay, once again. Uh, well, the Japanese left is against rearmament and arms exports, going back to Article 9. But is there any appetite left of center for those reforms of revising the constitution and shaping the economy towards the
Yeah.
defense industry and arms exports? The question is about the left of center factions. In
Okay.
yes, and
So who is this? Who asked this?
Rian Fairchild. I
So
apologize for
Rianne, thank you very much for the
mistake.
question. And I guess you are a Japan watcher, you're a Japan hand, you watch this. Japanese voters are famously fickle, right? They'll kind of go this way and they'll go that way. And with regard to the question, the specific question you asked, all we need is an activant, something to happen, some incident. For example, North Korea fires one of these rockets and it lands in the water, but it kills a Japanese fisherman. Or even worse, a self-defense forces officer is somehow killed because of a mistake or because the Chinese water cannon shot him in the nose or something like that. So some sort of an activant, it is really delicate. And I think the United States would support and bolster that. And I think you're seeing this really significant drift towards the United States, towards assuming more of the defense of the islands and the defense of the region, reliant upon Japan, even though Japan doesn't want to do it. But you know, if we can sell more products and automobiles aren't working, we have to import these F-150s. You know, they don't. You know, they don't even have any market for them. So they're going to import these trucks, very popular trucks in the United States, beefy. They look great. They're very muscular. And Ms. Takaichi agreed that we will import what 350 of them or something like that. There's a number of them, but I don't think people are going to actually buy them. They're just going to distribute them to you know, snow clearing and you know, some self-defense areas or something like that. I don't think even you know, the infrastructure for service and support for a vehicle like that, and also other GM cars or Detroit cars, it's so massive. Other Europeans have done it. They've paid the investment. They've built out the network. They're selling cars. Rolls Royce, Bentley, these high end cars are selling like hotcakes, but they do have the infrastructure established. And bringing in these trucks, I think it's just a gesture. But yeah, it is possible that just a single incident could occur, and all of a sudden the population is going this way, and the revision of the Constitution is hoisted, and it happens within 6 months.
Okay, thank you for this. And we've got a question from Tom Logan. Tom,
Hi,
thank you
Tom.
very much for this. So he writes, will the issue of the Ishin party's 10% reduction of Diet members' seats become a reality?
Yes.
If so, what impact might it have on the minor parties such as Hoshuto, Sanseito, and Shaminto?
Well, that's the whole reason. I think Ishin has said, look, we can extract something. Forget about the cabinet seat. So, as juicy as that is, let's go for something that's strategically a little bit more juicy for us. We can get more long term benefit and value. Forget that. Tell them we're not going to join the coalition, but we want these things because strategically they mean something to us. They fit into our long term plan. If we go into the cabinet, we're going to be under scrutiny, and then we have to kiss and make up, and we have to be friendly to them. And whenever the female prime minister does something that we don't like, we have to keep our mouths shut. So forget that, but go for these things here. And what's the best one? Yeah, let's reduce the diet seats by 10%. And these fringe guys, they'll go away because they only represent, you know, a certain voice of the population. And those voices can be absorbed very easily by Ishin, for example. We can absorb their issue and make it our issue. That's what the LDP does. That's what the Republicans do. That's what the Democrats do. That they take an issue that their opposition has and they change it a little bit and they promote it and then they make it their own and they pretend like it was their idea in the first place to attract those voters. So everything depends on the election, and that's why there's always this thread. Is there going to be a general election? If there's a general election, what are the terms and conditions and how will people vote? So that the atmospherics aren't right for a general election. Ishin isn't in position yet. And they've told the LDP, if you're not successful in the first 53 days, reduction of 10%. So reduction of 10% doesn't mean that Ishin gets those 10% or gets any portion of those 10%. It just means that it's reduced. The real rubber hits the road when there's an election and there are the same number of voters for a reduced number of seats. That's when Ishin is gambling that they're going to come up stronger. They're going to say, we formed a bit of a coalition with the LDP, but we don't like this, this, and this. If they were in the coalition, they wouldn't be able to say that. So vote for us. We are your party of choice. We will defend your issues. And let's revise the Constitution and let's beef up defense spending. And we're going to take Japan into the new epoch. So something like that.
All right. Yes. And following up with another question, this time from Stephen Cleary. Thank you very much, Stephen, for the question. It's about Ishin again. Ishin-no-kai, as part of their deal to support the LDP, has proposed designating Osaka rather than Tsukuba as Japan's secondary administrative hub in the event of a major earthquake, disabling Tokyo. Considering the significant seismic and tsunami risks posed by a potential Nankai Trough earthquake affecting areas between Tokyo and Osaka, as well as the ongoing risk of a major event in the Kanto region, what are the potential implications of this proposal for Japan's disaster resilience, political continuity, and regional development planning?
Yeah, that's a great observation. So Tsukuba is a little bit more inland. Its proximity to Tokyo, even if there was a disaster and a tsunami that kind of comes into Tokyo Bay. Tokyo Bay, if it was hit by a tsunami kind of broadside, yes, the whole, this is an enormous bay, Tokyo Bay. It drains and then it comes back in and fills up. And a lot of the train systems are underground, the subways, they would be flooded. Thousands upon thousands of people would be killed just in the flood, not about the earthquake, but just in the tsunami. The earthquake is something different. It is likely that Tsukuba would be less impacted by that. And Tsukuba is like, it's like a city waiting to be built. Wide boulevards. If you haven't been to Tsukuba, it's a very pleasant place. They've got trees, they've got boulevards. There's not a whole lot of tall buildings. It's nothing like Tokyo, but it is situated to be occupied with lots of, I mean, even tents or prefab buildings, you can do that. Osaka is also in a bay, a massive bay, Osaka Bay. And yes, if there was a Nankai Trough earthquake like we had with Fukushima or Sendai, and it swept in, the Osaka is a bit more protected in Osaka Bay, but you just never know if an earthquake of a huge magnitude, you just can't predict that. But I think what they want, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, that Tokyo is so centralized. Everything happens here. The heads of government, the ministries, the banks, the infrastructure, the corporations. Japan is the world's second economy, then third, fourth, now the fifth economy. If that happened and Japan was crippled, the whole world economy would suffer as a result of that. So I think it's a good idea to have that planning in place, but I think it's mostly dramatics and having Japan move away from this centralization of authority and power and distributing it. That has happened just a little bit, not enough to make a whole lot of difference, but melding Tokyo and Osaka, I think, is the game here. Everybody understands it's going to take years and decades to do that, but let's get on track. Let's put it down. Let's agree to it, and then let's begin to put those infrastructure issues in place. You know, for example, just preparing for a natural disaster in Osaka to protect, you know, the population and make sure that there's no flooding of the subways. If there's flooding of the subways, I mean, there are people that just immediately will perish as a consequence of that. So having that infrastructure, having the dedication of funds from the national budget to do that, I think it's a long play. It's a long game.
It is indeed, but also another thing that is very little known about. I'm not talking about the government this time, but of course, if there is a need for building more infrastructure, all the projects will be commissioned to private organizations and private companies, right? And one thing that is very little known about Japanese corporations is that every company of, I mean, the construction companies, they have funds, money that is put away for reconstruction. And that doesn't necessarily mean reconstruction, of the national infrastructure. But of course, it's a well-known fact, again, that another fact, of course, that Japanese corporations sit on a lot of equity. They do not use that equity, right? And part of that equity is basically stored in funds that are funds for reconstruction in an event of disaster, natural disaster. So, okay, just let me move on. There is another question related to this topic.
Maya,
This is yes.
before you get too far forward, you
Okay.
said earlier that Byron in Washington D.C. had three
Yes,
questions, but
exactly.
you only
I'm
got
moving.
okay.
This is the third. I'm going to his third
Didn't want
question
to
right
ignore
now.
him. You know,
So,
we'd have hell to pay for that.
yes. So on Osaka, this is the question. On Osaka as the second capital for Japan, how much is known about what Ishin is seeking in terms of construction of new buildings, facilities, etc.? Might other cities like Nara, Fukuoka, and 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 so on be included in that concept of second capital?
Yeah, I don't think they have the throw weight to assert that. It would be Osaka, maybe Fukuoka, because that's where the population, that's where the trade is. Fukuoka is on the other side, on the Japan Sea side, so it's not as favorable. The Pacific side is really where trade and flights and that sort of thing are coming in. Maybe, yeah, I think it's got to be on the Pacific side. Not Sapporo, but there
Yeah.
are only a couple of countries that kind of satisfy the basic requirements for
Mhm.
a second capital. And even though Takaichi, she's from the region, but Nara is not it's not suitable as a second capital. Even Tsukuba is not quite, but its proximity and the land and the boulevards and the amount of space,
Mhm.
flattened space, it's ready. The land is cleared and it's flat, and maybe they have a garden or trees on it, but it's ready for occupancy at the drop of a hat. So that's its salient feature there. Osaka, yeah, I can't see there be and the same thing is with the integrated resorts. Integrated resorts want to be in those kinds of capital-like cities where there's a lot of tourism, where there's access to easy transportation, airlines, and public transportation, that sort of thing. And there are only a couple of cities that really match that: Yokohama, Osaka, Fukuoka. Who else is on the hotspot? Sapporo for integrated resorts, perhaps. Yeah, they're just very few. But those are kind of signatures that also are reflective of the second capital theory as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And then we are moving on to a question by Greg. So the topic of the question is the LDP again, and will the Benkyokai which we talked about earlier, will the Benkyokai go away as part of the LDP agreement with the Ishin as a part of their 12 concessions?
No, I don't think Benkyo Kai will disappear. Benkyo Kai serves a very good purpose. People like me want to be close to the Diet member, but you don't want to visit his office all the time. There's a more efficient way of having a coalition of supporters or people who maybe they don't believe in you or they don't follow you, but they want to hear what your views are from time to time. Not everybody who wants to be in a Benkyokai can join. You have to be vetted. It's just not you pay and then you go in. People have to know who you are. You have to you're not a spy, you're not from the opposition party, that sort of thing. But then there are other Benkyo-kais that are looser like that. The issue with the Benkyo-kai is the money that's being given to join them and who's giving that money. So sometimes if I'm a company and I have somebody in my company that's going to the Benkyo-kai and they give the Nimaen for the fee, that fee doesn't, I take the receipt and I give it to my company and then the company gives it to me. So it's not, I'm joining in the persona of the company. So the company is producing this wealth for the politicians, which is reported, you know, ostensibly. And it's not, it could be that the company has a regulation. The company can't support that. So you go and join that Benkyo-kai. And if you're an individual, you say, wait a minute, that's my lunch money for the next month. I don't want to pay Nimaen. And if it's Nimaen, it's probably part of my job. I'm going to be doing this 4 or 5 times a month. And why do I have to do that? That's not part of my job. If it's part of my job, then reimburse me for it. So there's that issue. And then the other issue is for this revision of Benkyo-kai is you have to be a Japanese national in order to join the Benkyo-kai. So that puts a person like me, I'm not a Japanese national, but I do this as a part of my living. I advise foreign companies and foreign clients all the time on what's going on, like this briefing here. The reason why I can do this briefing is because I join so many Benkyo-kai and it's part of the lifeblood of what I do on a daily basis. So it's not that difficult for me to speak somewhat extemporaneous. I have notes that I speak from, but one of the issues is we don't want these foreigners joining the Benkyo-kai. You know, they're spies and look at their last name. And so we want to limit it just to the Japanese. So there is that thread going on. And I think they've passed a regulation where foreigners can't join the Benkyo-kai unless they're representative of a Japanese or they're being brought in by a Japanese. So it is flipping things around, the Benkyo-kai issue. This is from Greg, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Greg and I attend. I see Greg frequently in these study sessions. They're great to join. They give you a tune-up on what's going on. They help you understand what particular politicians are thinking about and what's going on their pet issues. It's great intel, but I think from what I understand, that door is closing up very quickly to accommodate the requirements for campaign finance oversight.
All right, thank you for this, Timothy. And then one more question from Greg again. This time it's about a specific member of the LDP. Is Aso happy sitting back and playing the power broker and not taking a cabinet role for himself? Or was it a trade-off to get Takaichi in as prime minister?
No, I think I don't know if Taro Aso even goes into the office anymore. I think he mostly stays at home. I don't think he golfs, but he's like 88 years old. He's already said, in the next election, I'm not going to run. I'm through. But he is, by all accounts, the most powerful politician in Japanese politics today. And when he wants to weigh in on an issue, that issue will more likely than not go his way, no matter what anybody else says. So he has considerable political heft. And I think he's okay with having his brother-in-law as the Secretary General. That's, some people would say, the second most powerful position. You've got the Prime Minister, who is the president of the LDP. And then within the LDP, number 2 is the Secretary General. So that's within the LDP structure. And then she's also the Prime Minister. It's a different structure here. She has the Prime Ministership, and then she has her cabinet that she needs to respond to, and they need to respond to her. But they all respond to members of the Diet because it's a parliamentary democracy. So she doesn't have to respond to the voters, but she does have to respond to the Diet. And when they're on tender hooks about a particular issue and they don't control a majority, then they have to pay attention to people. They have to negotiate with them. Things go a little bit more slowly. They have to give concessions and that sort of thing. So it's much more difficult. But, you know, to have Mr. Aso's brother-in-law as number 2, yeah, he's in all the meetings. He knows what's going on. So I think that's good enough. And I also think we're going to see a dynamic change in Japanese politics. Number one, if there is a general election, because in that general election, Mr. Aso is not going to run. Somebody's going to run in his place, probably one of his sons or his son. The other thing is if something should happen with Mr. Aso where he decides he's going to resign or he's going to leave politics, there's nobody there to fill that void. It's kind of like Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe didn't have a number two. When he left, they had a committee of 5 or 6, and they couldn't even do a very good job of it. They tried, but even within that 5 or 6, everybody wanted to be on top. There was a lot of infighting, and let's restart this thing because that money we're not reporting taxes on, it's so sweet, and I need it to kind of do the things that I want to do that I don't have to report about. So when Mr. Aso decides that he's going to leave politics, if he leaves and he doesn't run for an office, he can still sit back and smoke cigars and wear that cool hat and still dominate Japanese politics. What happens in Japanese politics is once you're prime minister and you finish being prime minister, your voice and your power actually ascends. It actually gets better because you're not working all the time. You're not reporting to the press reports. You're not under attack and that sort of thing. And you can control things from the distance. I think Mr. Aso likes it that way. He's always been like deputy prime minister or vice president of the LDP, something that's kind of a little bit back in the shadows, but influential when he wants it to be. I hope that's responsive.
Yes, I hope so too. And Tom Logan says the Benkyo-kai or the study groups issue is of great interest, and also for years Europeans and Americans had a seat there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you for this. And from Yuka, we've got Yuka. Thank you so very much for tuning in and for the positive feedback. Yuka says, thanks for another great session. I am interested in learning more about Sanaenomics in the future sessions. Yeah. So we'll be following that for sure. And thank you.
Abenomics 2.0. That's what it's being portrayed as. Yeah.
At the moment, but I don't see it actually happening that way because there are quite a few points which she is trying to to tell people that her thoughts and her policies will be different from the Abenomics as well, right?
I actually think she'll be better at it and more successful than Abe was. The Abenomics and the 3 arrows, it wasn't well thought out, and it generated a lot of counterproductive issues. I think she's a policy wonk. She knows this stuff. She's been honed on it for a long time. I think she'll come up with something far more robust.
Yeah, I think that just one thing which I don't agree on is that the Abenomics was not well thought out, and well, it was the very first time when somebody tried to do something like that of such a huge scale, right? So and of course in the beginning there was confusion. It was really difficult to start moving all that apparatus. Of course, in the Diet in Nagatacho, in Kasumigaseki, and throughout the country. But that's a topic for a different conversation. So, and yes, Tom, thank you very much for continuing the comment. Your comment, he says, yes, for a long time, for years, Europeans and Americans had a seat at the table in various Shinga-kai and Kenkyu-kai, which is research groups and government of Japan advisory groups. So could they gain access to any Shingikai without admitting some foreigners themselves to be a part of those discussions, or at least observers in the room? Yeah. What an irony if they barred them.
Yes. So even now, you have to be invited. Even if you're the president of the EU or the American Chamber of Commerce, you still have to be vetted. It just doesn't go with the position. And you have to be a pretty diligent participant. You have to, show up. You have to be on time. You don't kind of throw your weight around or be arrogant in any way. You need to be, something of an individual of respectability and prominence in order to go in. It's just not an open door policy. That policy has changed. So the door is becoming closer and the entry is becoming tighter. You still need to be vetted, but I think within the next 12 months, foreigners are going to have a restricted entry into Benkyokai.
Right. And also, I think that basically these policies are for the sake of the Japanese population. They are not for the sake of the foreigners, right? Well, it's uncomfortable to admit, and since we're foreigners here, it's not something that we want hearing about. But the truth is, once again, that this is Japan, and all the policies are made to benefit the Japanese citizens first, and second, and maybe third, then the people who come from other countries. So, well, for good or for bad, we don't know that.
If you let those guys in, why the hell aren't you letting me in? Just because I'm Chinese? What the hell, right? You don't want to have to deal with that. Also, Shinjiro Koizumi is now defense minister. And Miss Takaichi, she didn't wag her finger, and you can't say she thumped his chest, but she did say, these three philosophies of Japan's defense posture, these three policy papers that we produced 3 years ago, I need you to revise those. I need you to tighten those up. So that goes with, foreigners owning land and protecting, assets within a certain distance of military assets and their participation in the government and their visas, right? So a lot of people are up in arms that, the visas are going to be restricted. They're really targeting the Chinese. And it's true. There was a report yesterday that, maybe 600 Chinese companies were all registered in one location, in one building. And they're rating that now and they're investigating. The issue here, though, is of all of the people that are taking advantage of that visa that is legal by nature, the majority are Chinese, but the amount of investors coming in, the amount of tourists coming in, the lion's share are the Chinese. So just, it's not attacking the Chinese, but just on a proportional issue, the Chinese are getting a little bit more scrutiny. But, although China is Japan's largest trading partner, there are some political tensions there, geopolitical tensions. There's a lot of spying. There's a lot of eavesdropping. There's a lot of this saber rattling and this incursion into Japanese exclusive air zones and the senkakus. And there's a lot going on there. So, yeah, I think it's not just the Chinese, but I think they're tightening it up because, for so many years, we all know this, Japan is a playground for budding spies. They don't have a anti-spy agency. They don't have people that are chasing spies. They have something like that in the United States, but in Japan, they don't. In South Korea, they don't have a law that can take and arrest people who are foreign spies. They have to catch them on a different kind of legality. So Japan has long been known as a good training ground for young people to come in and hide in Bain & Company or maybe one of the embassies and kind of practice their skills and cut their teeth on it. But I think it's, like you say, Maya, it's for the Japanese, and the Japanese want to protect themselves, and they don't want to be picked apart because people, are integrated so deep into the fabric of politics or policy that they can influence it. This is our country, we don't need that extra influence. And I think that's probably, so this thing, we've been hearing it a lot of recently, Maya, about the anti-foreigners and let's make sure there are not enough foreigners and no illegal foreigners, that sort of thing that's come up recently. I think it's, make America great again, make Japan great again. I think that theme is something that's going to resonate with Trump, and I think that's one of the directions that Japan is leaning towards. So we can see more action there. Not everybody's going to love it, but I think, we're, like I said, we're taking a different tact in Japanese politics since last Tuesday.
Yes, and I also want to say that that narrative has become stronger, and maybe because of the elections, right? But at the same time, last week I traveled throughout the country, and I didn't detect any bad feelings towards me, or my fellow travelers. Not at all. Everything was smooth. All the local Japanese people, they were very helpful. When they saw that I was in trouble, they helped me. They went out of their own way to help. So what I can say is that yes, there is the narrative, and then there is the reality. I'm not saying that the people who dislike foreigners are zero. There are probably some here, but the majority of the Japanese
Yeah.
do not hold any bad feelings towards foreign visitors. Right. Okay, so, well, I think that we have gone through all the questions and comments and answers. Again, to everybody who stayed with us and who took part in the discussion, thank you so very much for being with us again. It's a rainy morning here in Kanto, of course, in Tokyo and other parts of this area. We appreciate your time spent with us. Again, please forgive me for repeating myself, but help us spread the word of these briefings. Once again, they're free of charge for everybody who is interested in knowing what shapes Japanese politics, what shapes Japanese policies, and how these policies actually can impact business, the business of foreigners, the lifestyle of foreigners, and the life in general of foreigners, of course, here in Japan. But not only that, they are important for everybody who is maybe a permanent resident here or a national of Japan as well. So thank you very much for helping us do that, and please stay with us. We'll be here once again next Sunday at 8:20. Yes, Timothy?
Okay. So after this briefing, we always produce a synopsis. And if people can't join or they can't stand listening to me for any more than the first opening,
Right.
we do encapsulate it, and I understand that. We do encapsulate it into a synopsis. How can people get on the mailing list for the synopsis and forget about watching the briefing at 8:20 on Sunday mornings?
All right, so you can go to Substack and look up Langley Esquire there, or you can let me know, just direct message, send me a direct message and let me know your email address so I can add you to the mailing list.
Okay.
That's
One other
it.
question. One other question. I went to a diplomatic party the other week, and somebody wanted to know about, oh, you do a politics briefing. I've been a diplomat for 2 years here. I didn't even know about that. My gosh. So apparently my marketing is not that great. Not everybody that should know knows. And most of the diplomats think that LinkedIn is a spy bot, so they're not going to join it. They don't join any of the social media platforms. So what's the easiest way to tell somebody? It's on YouTube too. And if you just type in this, you can sign in, or maybe you can subscribe to this so you can watch it on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. What would they actually do? What are the shortest signature that they can put into the search engine so that they come up with episode 400 or 246?
Right. Okay. That's
That
the
was a
question.
question.
A
That's a
question.
question
Question to whom? To everybody who is listening
to
to us?
you. To
To
you.
me.
What? Yeah. What do people type in so that they can come up with this briefing? If they don't want to have the synopsis, they don't want LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Japanese politics one-on-one.
Okay. And is it one hyphen on hyphen one, or is it just one on
Yes.
one? It's not the number
One.
one on
It's
one.
words. It's words. One
Okay.
hyphen on hyphen one.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I've never done that. I've never tried to Google it because I'm busy kind of making sure my hair is okay. And yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Okay, thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Maya. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, it's a pleasure always. And again, we'll see you next Sunday. I hope, hopefully, there will be also more people and more people watching. Stay with us and remember to have a great week because
Thanks,
it
Maya.
depends on you. Yes.
Next weekend's a 3-day weekend. Monday is a national holiday.
Right. Okay. That's a good thing to know.
Let you know. Thank you.